Rebel Devs Podcast, a show that challenges conventional thinking in the tech industry. Each episode features conversations with solutionists who have taken unconventional approaches to problem solving, pushing the boundaries of what's possible in their respective fields. Join the devolution.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Rebel Devs Podcast. I'm Tom May, one of your hosts from Different Dev in my professional world. And I have my partner in crime, as always, Jonah May from Cyber Fortress. Jonah, how's it going today?
It's going, I was sick earlier this week, but I'm back at it now, partly with playing catch up at work.
Yeah, we always got to pay the bills. And we have a special guest here with us. We have Elton from Backblaze, who's one of our favorite partners. I know at Different Dev, we actually work quite closely with Backblaze, and they're also one of the sponsors of the Texas Veeam user group that Jonah and I lead. So rather than try to give a horrible introduction, I think the man, the myth, the legend himself, Elton, can do it better than I can. So Elton, tell us all about yourself here.
The myth, I think, I won't question the other ones, but the myth, I'm real, baby. Thank you so much for having me, Tom, as well as Jonah. I'm really excited to be on this podcast with you guys. My name is Elton Carneiro, and I'm with Backblaze. I head of the partnership team. As Tom, you said, we're close partners on the Different Dev side. We really enjoy working together. But broader than that, we have a huge Veeam community, a user community that we support, that we serve, and we're really happy to be able to do that.
Thank you. We're kind of continuing on our series on resilient storage for the listeners out there. Of course, resiliency is everything with disaster recovery and backup. If your backups are not immutable, if they're not safe, they don't make sense. They're just really not backups. 20 years ago, we could say just get them off site, which of course, hey, Backblaze, this is why we're here today. But we have to add some more protections. So resiliency. And we've spoken to Object First as the first part of our series. Actually, I believe Rick Vanover was the first part, kind of bringing about the idea of resilient storage. And then we did move to Object First, who we partner with. And this is kind of our preferred partner on premises, where we talk about kind of the concept of not being able to delete, plug and play, 10-minute out of the box integration. But any good architecture, when Veeam people talk about, we don't just talk about on-premise. We now need to move to a secondary location or even a tertiary. Some of our folks are already writing to backups out there in Azure or AWS, but Backblaze brings a little bit different of a flavor here. So as we jump into this, we're going to talk a little bit about S3 targeting for Veeam, object storage, and the main players that everybody always seems to come to mind are the big three. We see Amazon, Wasabi, and Backblaze. And I love Backblaze, and I'll just put this out here right now because when I write an email, a human being speaks to me and I can have a great support conversation. I think some of the other companies are a little too big sometimes, and Backblaze is a huge publicly traded company, but they kind of have that small boutique feel. So I think I've teed it up a little bit, but Elton, tell us a little bit about the Backblaze solution. What is it? What makes it special?
Yeah, so thank you. So Backblaze, we're a public cloud storage platform that is S3 compatible. So if you work with the big hyperscalers and you use the S3 protocol, you can easily use Backblaze without having to, and take on a whole bunch of burden from a resource from engineering perspective. So we're fully S3 compatible. We're a fraction of the cost. And as Tom said, we're easy, right? Our whole mantra is make it easy for the end customer. Let's take on the complexities. Let's hide the complexities, but make sure the offering is affordable, it's easy, and it's secure.
Very good. That's a great overview. And every time I think about object storage, I tend to think about tiering, and our resident expert over here, Jonah, I'm going to put you on the spot. But when we talk about immutable storage and object lock, what is that? And even more so, maybe we should delve a little bit more, but things like capacity, archive tier, performance tier. Can you explain a little bit about the tiering and how that all works?
Yeah, so how most people use the tiering in a scale-out backup repository is there's almost three tiers. There's your performance tier, which is typically your on-prem storage. It's your latest backups. There's capacity tier, which can mirror the performance tier, but a lot of people use it to offload backups older than a certain number of days as a long-term retention to something like a Backblaze. And then taking it further, you can also leverage with some S3 providers archive tier, where you can almost send your monthlies to your capacity tier and your yearlies to your archive tier. So you can ensure across all three tiers that you have different mutability periods meeting your retention requirements for each set of GFS points.
Why exactly do we care about all this? I mean, what's the net driver here? Why do I even want to have any of this? Because it sounds like a whole lot of complexity for something that should be so easy.
So we want this because ransomware doesn't always necessarily just attack and encrypt you the moment it enters your environment. We see some cases where it waits sometimes 3 or even 6 months. And so a lot of people will set their immutability period to match their primary retention period. Like, let's say I'm keeping 14 days of restore points on-prem. I might have a 14-day immutability period. But then if that ransomware waits for multiple months, it can then delete all of your monthlies because those backups aren't immutable. So by tiering it into each of those tiers in the scale-out repository and setting an immutability period on each, you ensure that if for some reason your newer backups are unusable, your older backups still exist and don't get wiped by the ransomware. So even if it's not the latest data, you have something you can recover off of.
Fair enough, fair enough. And so we've now just kind of gone through something that sounds way too complex. But Elton, I'll call you out here. You said, hey, you know what? This should be relatively easy with Backblaze. And when I read through all the Veeam documentation, it's always about AWS. It's always AWS, do this, do this, do this. And I don't see the word Backblaze pop up. But I mean, is it hard to do Backblaze instead of AWS? And why would I want Backblaze? Because I mean, if Amazon's the biggest, they must be the best. I mean, I'll go out there and say it. I'll draw the sword. Let's duel. So am I right? Am I wrong?
Yeah.
All right.
Well, if you have endless amounts of money that you don't care about spending, then maybe you can choose Amazon. The whole idea is that when we talk about easy, right? When we partnered with Veeam, we wanted to allow users to get immutability, to get ransomware protection. And we actually coined the term, get ransomware protection in just 2 clicks. So the idea is that you have a Backblaze account, you have your Veeam VBR, and all you do is you enable object lock on your Backblaze bucket, and you go into Veeam and you enable immutability in Veeam, and you're done. You're protected, right? To Jonah's point, you can control how long you want to make sure that your backups are immutable for. That's a setting that you get to choose. The default, even though on the interface you can set it to 1 day, Veeam adds 10 days on the back end, so you get a default of 10 days. But you can do 14, you can do a month, you can do a whole year. It's really entirely up to you. And it is very true that ransomware is getting smarter and smarter. When you get attacked, it's not necessarily that all your data is getting encrypted, as Jonah said. It does sit, dormant for a while, but also we've seen ransomware starting to attack the backups and deleting the backups because they've witnessed, customers saying, hey, it's okay. I'll just, scorch earth on my infrastructure and I'll restore for my backups and I don't have to pay you anything. So in order to make money, they're starting to attack the backups. And if you make your backups immutable, there's no way for ransomware. Even Backblaze employees cannot delete your data. So it really gives you that level of protection and that gives you that virtual air-gapped protection to make sure that nothing can modify, nothing can touch your backups when you store them in Backblaze. And it's at a fraction of the price. Amazon charges, $23 a terabyte, where on Backblaze we're 1/5 the price. And we'll touch on a little bit of this later on. We offer free egress from Backblaze, right? So you don't have to think about how much is it going to cost me to restore my data, how much is it going to cost me to test my backups. We eliminate those complexities and we make it easy and give you the power to make sure and the confidence to make sure that you're selecting a provider that's, one, answers the phone, responds to an email, but also can allow you to restore your data. We're not going to hold your data ransom, even if the ransomware folks want to try to hold it ransom.
Yeah, and I love that because the fact of the matter is every bit deal that I quote, it's always about cost. And for the longest time with Different Dev, we were professional services only. We didn't do anything. And more customers were like, can you just take the burden of the management and whatnot? And I've built S3, okay? I've built Ceph clusters, and it is an absolute nightmare from a provider perspective. And I've looked at, well, maybe we should buy a third-party storage solution that provides that. That person had endless amounts of headache, but I still owned it. So I knew eventually either I'm paying a support contract, they're going away, like I'm in a bad hostage situation. What I like from the perspective of Backblaze, and we use this with all of our customers, is when we write up there, one, as a provider, I don't have to build this cluster. I can understand that it's going to work. It's going to be secure. It's going to be authenticated, everything that it needs to tick in every single box, but I don't have the support cost to it. So as I use a Backblaze, it's there and it works, but the cost is really, really amazing to me. It is so much less. I know with our customers, there's a good price. It runs about what you all retail out, and we provide the level of support, which is pretty cool from a different dev customer perspective. And the fact that you're already going to call us if your backups are breaking. Now you're going to call us if the storage is identified as a breaking point in there, and we're going to handle that for you. And then if we can't figure it out, we phone a friend, the Backblaze gets involved. It's there. So the support structure's there for that same cost. But two things I think drove me really to loving the solution, in all honesty, is the pay for what you use that you've mentioned here. I mean, that is pretty special because we were with another storage provider because they were kind of early to market and not Amazon. And as we've drained off our storage, we're still paying for storage we're not using. And it's so frustrating. And I'm like, when does it fall off? When do we stop paying? So what is it when you say pay for what you use? I mean, do you really mean that? Like it's my high watermark for the month? Is that what we're talking about when we say pay what you use?
Yeah, absolutely. And so when we talk about pay for what you use, our billing is based hourly, right? So you're really just paying for the storage that's stored on an hourly basis. We have no retention policies. We're not forcing any retention policies on our customers. So if you want to delete your data after an hour, you're not paying for anything more than that. So there's a term being coined in the industry called delete penalties, whereby you get penalized for deleting your data. We do not have that concept at Backblaze. So we make it easy. We make your data, again, we're not going to hold your data ransom. It's your data. You should pay for what you use.
I noticed that when we first came into this concept of S3 storage, Amazon was the first to have it. And we had the whole capacity and archive tier, like Jonah said. And the main reason was that Amazon, you could have your regular storage and then you could have your Glacier. And Glacier was like, set it, forget it. We won't really charge you as much. And we knew with their regular capacity storage, we were paying egress fees, and it was like, we're paying to store it and we're egressing when we bring it back. And then we'd move over to Glacier and we're like, woo, thank God we're not paying as much to store it. But then they were still getting their money when you retrieved it. So it was really like making a bad decision about insurance. You were like, I know I need insurance, but come on, what if something major happens? I'll just do that $10,000 deductible. And before you know it, you have an appendix that's rupturing and you're like, I don't have $10,000. What's going on? And it's literally happened to you at the worst moment of your life. And that's what I felt about Amazon when we were over there. But with this other provider we're at, their big thing was they kept telling us that we don't pay for egress. We don't pay for egress. And I think you and I had a conversation at one point and you said, why don't you read that contract a little bit deeper? While they may allude to it, it's not really the case. And then I think you told me it's like 3 times egress or something included with Backblaze. So am I getting my facts straight or am I jumbled here, Elton?
No, absolutely. So one of the things that we take pride in terms of how we operate our business and how we function as a company is we are very transparent about what we do and how we do what we do. This goes back to the days of us starting to publish hard drive stats for every single spinning hard drive in our data center and calling out all the manufacturers as well as the failure rates on various different models that we had. So when we talk about free egress at Backblaze, we want to make sure the customer understands what free egress really means. And we offer up to 3x free egress of what you store per month. Some of the other providers say we have free egress, but the fine print says you can only egress what you store in your bucket one. So it's kind of 1x, and anything more, you'll be billed in overages, right? Whereas we're very transparent. Again, we don't want a customer to, encounter a gotcha moment whereby, why am I getting this thing on my bill? I didn't know about it. We're very transparent. We're very upfront. We state our billing, but there's nothing to hide when it comes to, how we price our offering.
Very cool. And I'm going to bring Jonah into this a little bit more because he does work on the cloud provider side. And sometimes people feel that cloud provider versus S3 storage is kind of like this battle. And we're starting to see a shift out there with this mindset from the professional services on my side. I'm always like, the same reason that we say 3 copies of your data, I really think we need to say 4 copies of your data. We're always local, remote. And to me, I always want another remote, because the concept of being on premises to another ecosystem, it's resilience. Well, if I go to a tertiary solution, even better. So if I have a customer that is doing work local, they transfer workloads to Amazon because they're like, look, I can build, I can spin, I can do everything. I've got hot. I've spent a lot of money doing this. I have some things in Amazon and it comes down to my production site. I'm always like, well, we need to introduce a tertiary solution. So for tertiary, we can do object storage, which is great because, V12, newer versions of Veeam, we write straight to object, which is wonderful. But you have these things called cloud providers. And Jonah, I'm going to kind of bring you into this because this is where you are with CyberFortress. You're not an S3 provider, but I mean, what's your concept with S3? And I'm going to help soften a little bit, because what I'm hoping you'll touch upon is, even for a service provider, isn't there a lot of hooks now for S3 on the back end where things you used to have to build and do, you have other capabilities to hook in? So what's your take on the whole S3 world coming from cloud?
Even a lot of cloud providers these days, in some form or capacity, are using S3 storage. Mainly you see it in use for your capacity tier and your VB365 backups, because the performance and storage savings on object versus Windows with Jet database is just so much better on object. But there's also increasingly a number of cloud providers looking to evaluate S3 as their primary storage. The challenge is just, in a lot of cases, you're talking potentially with larger providers like CyberFortress, first of all, petabytes of data on Windows or Linux repositories from the years we've been in service in our customer base. But equally so, I have not delved too much into the architecture of S3, but I know a lot of our extremely large competitors have, and they've struggled with some of the Veeam settings. It's gotten better in recent releases, but running some of their own flavors of Ceph, kind of like you talked about. So the challenge we find as a cloud provider is object will work great if you're going to a vendor like a Backblaze, but the challenge we have is RTO and RPO requirements with our customers. In a lot of cases, you're almost seeing, rather than the traditional 2-tier with offsite Cloud Connect, I go backups offsite or I do replication offsite, you're almost seeing a 3-tier now, where if you don't need the RTOs and the RPOs or can't justify the cost of a cloud provider, you go offsite to an S3 provider. And there are some DR capabilities there. But at least, and Elton, I'm sure we can touch on this a little bit more later on in the podcast, my interactions with some of the Cloud IBRs and hooks that do some of those recoveries, the performance is good, but it's not quite the same as having your storage located in the same rack as a VMware cluster like you would with a cloud provider.
I mean, I'll build upon this even more. So CyberFortress, you guys have been around forever. I helped found and start a cloud provider as well that went platinum, very large. It's still kicking around. I'm not there. And it was a race for storage. And we used to joke, I sounded like Scotty from Star Trek. Instead of saying, I'm giving her all she's got, I'm like, I just need to buy some more storage. And it was always like storage, power, rack, move facilities, add data centers. And it was this capacity planning nightmare. And a lot of cloud providers that are just coming into the program as silvers, they'll call me for consultation and they'll say, how do I build something like a CyberFortress, a Data Prize, an 1111? And I'm like, God's honest truth, guys, I don't know that you're going to build it. Like, that mindset is gone. I know that you could squeeze every single penny out by getting your own hardware, but you're going to have a huge capital gain. You're going to build it all, maintain it, and you're going to run your little report that's like, hey, we're doing this for $1 a terabyte or something, and you're going to celebrate and have parties. But what you're not factoring in is the capital expense to buy all this equipment and the interest on that money. You are going to also not factor in your infrastructure teams, your support teams. You're just spending so much support cycle keeping the lights on. So if I had to build a new cloud provider today, I would really step back and go, can S3 be a viable offering? And I think the answer is for backup as a service all day long. You can just write that on over and get yourself some bulk savings with Backblaze, and then boom, you're in business. But even behind the scenes, if you bring in your primary production, like you're saying, Jonah, like you can have that lower cost close by storage because maybe you do need Veeam replication. Maybe you are doing recoveries from traditional Cloud Connect backups, but maybe you need to start archiving off, which really comes down to a lot of tape servers or an internal Ceph cluster, or even better, just hooking a bucket in your cloud repo over to Backblaze. So it really does tie in nicely, but I think what absolutely sealed the deal beside all of these things was the hook of Cloud IBR partnership here, which this has been pretty amazing. And Elton, I'm going to tee it over to you to tell us a little bit about Cloud IBR.
So I want to touch on a couple of things before we jump into Cloud IBR. Is there is an industry term about having 3-to-1 backups, three copies of your data, 2 different mediums, 1 offsite. What we have also seen is a lot of service providers are implementing the 4-3-2 backup strategy, whereby there's 4 copies of the data, right? Obviously, the customer has 2, the service provider has 2. 1 is running on the infrastructure and 1 is backed up offsite to Backblaze or a different cloud service provider. So there's definitely value in looking at object storage and cloud storage when it comes from a service provider's standpoint. And it provides the service provider a guarantee that if anything happens with their infrastructure, they're not losing customer data, and they're able to, restore the customer's environment as they build up the infrastructure again. So jumping into Cloud IBR, Cloud IBR is, if you talk about insurance, it's your insurance policy without having to pay for insurance. And it allows you to really, restore your backups in a cloud environment when you need it. The whole idea is that service providers can offer DR as a service, which there's a price point to it. And that price point is usually based on what the RPO and RTOs are. Right? But if you're a company or an organization, you're a school or university that doesn't have strict, RTOs, whereby you feel that it's okay to, take 12 hours, 24 hours, 48 hours to bring up your infrastructure. Cloud IBR is a great solution because it allows you to benefit from the ability of doing a restore in your time frame. And you only pay when the restore happens. So the whole premise is that the solution will spin up a whole bunch of cloud infrastructure. And with cloud infrastructure, you usually pay for what you use. But if you're not using it, you don't pay anything. So it's insurance without having to pay for insurance. And it's really simple. It's a click of a button. All your infrastructure gets spun up on the fly. Your Veeam repository is connected to that infrastructure, and you can now start restoring the backups that you care about. So in most cases, people want to get your email server, your web server back up and running. You can pull in those virtual machines or backups and run them in the cloud, and all the networking is taken care of for you and all that fun stuff. So it allows you to do that. But beyond restore, right? One of the things that we keep emphasizing on folks is that your backup is only as good as if you test them. Because if you don't test them, you have no idea what's going to happen the day you want to restore them, right? So we encourage our customers to, frequently test their backups, and Cloud IBR is a great tool for that because they can really test their backups in an isolated environment that's away from their infrastructure and make sure that those backups are actually, good backups and they can be restored.
And I love that idea. And Jonah and I have been demoing as Veeam Vanguards, the whole IBR product. And we've met with Greg over there who created this whole thing. He was an original Veeam Vanguard. He's not in the program anymore. One of the things that I looked at is whenever I look at Veeam, I'm always very transparent. And I'm like, listen, what Cloud IBR doing? I know hate that I say this, but it's double-edged. There's nothing special about it. Anything you see that they're doing, you can do. You can script it. You can write it. You can have it. And as quickly as I say that, I've done that and I never want to do that again. And so they've built a wonderful product that requires, much like your software, 0 support, 0 code pushes. Oh, there's a net framework. Oh, there's a Windows patch. Oh, there's a this. It doesn't work. But what I love is it incorporates things like pre-population of VPN users where it can generate passwords and kick them out. You can store your secure passwords for site to site. It takes care of the networking. And because it's all in there and it's Ansible based, it's just a point, shoot, go. So as the IBR team adds new features, it's there. And you're right. It's all about your testing, which we always say. So in professional services, we have forever pushed the idea of Veeam Recovery Orchestrator, a product that we love. However, I have a much less love for it because I see IBR. Okay. I can see where it is offsite and I'm testing my offsite and I don't have to have certain infrastructure points for it to work. And we can test it, build it. And not only does the customer get, point and shoot, it's there. It's doing a lot of what Veeam Recovery Orchestrator does, but offsite. But now it's also adding the level of access. And that's what people don't get in my experience. While you can test it, nobody really has the ability to say, what would it look like in a real world situation? So let's say we have a credit union, the corporate offices go down and they're like, what do they do? Or we have a manufacturing plant. We're like, okay, hypothetically, everybody go home on a Friday, work from home. But instead, what you're going to do is use this new VPN client in run, and they're running an IBR built off of Backblaze storage. It was built so people timed the return to operation to make sure it met the compliances. They're running it. They get a real feel of what it will be like in a DR scenario. And at the end, they can tear down, which is wonderful. When we move to Recovery Orchestrator, what a selling point is, it is automated in the fact that you can just schedule these recoveries and report back, and it gives you some reporting. So there's a little more hands-on with the IBR side to achieve what Veeam Recovery Orchestrator gives you. But the feature set is so much more robust. I've actually changed my thought to say VRO is a wonderful product from Veeam that does what it needs to do. And it will give you certain things, but you better have all your ducks in a row for connecting. When we talk IBR with Backblaze, we're like, listen, it's just there. So now you have to manually run it. But when you manually run it, you're just kicking off a script and you're making sure it runs instead of something else. So it's not a task scheduler thing. So I think that's a huge power in that. I want to ask Jonah, you're like the master scripter. You're on the automation desk for Veeam. So you're in the community and you're out there just preaching automation, Chocolatey, Ansible, PowerShelling, APIs. I mean, you have written something like this with configuration databases. What's your thought? If you started fresh today, are you building your own or are you IBRing it? Like, what are you doing?
Well, again, I think in my case, it's really going to come down to the RTOs. I think some of it we might see with some improvements and some future dev cycles, but in my testing with it, I can tell you, not only can we get the machines to boot faster in a place like a Cyber Fortress, because we can leverage instant VM recovery because latency is not as much of a concern, but when I do those vMotions behind the scenes to get them migrated out of the backup chains and into proper VMDK files, I do see about 50 to 100% faster migration speeds. But that's kind of where I said earlier, the price points are different. So it comes down to what are your RTO requirements. If you need things to be up and near replication RTOs, but you don't care about the IO performance, but behind the scenes, you do want it to migrate a little bit faster, that's where a cloud provider would come in. But if you can go, half a day or several days where you don't need the machines booted at all, that's maybe where a Backblaze and Cloud IBR is a little more economical. And personally, I'd love to see Cloud IBR leveraged in a way in which maybe cloud providers could use it internally within their infrastructure. But I know there's a lot of complexities there. Veeam is starting to open things up to cloud providers, but on our side, it's always been kind of a bit of a hacky mount the backups to another Veeam server, go in and do some manual restores to a vCenter or a Hyper-V cluster. Again, that has started to open up a little bit, but unfortunately, the framework's not there for something first party, like maybe a Veeam Recovery Orchestrator that works with Cloud Connect. So we still have to build something like a Cloud IBR just to use it internally for our customers.
And I'm going to toss it back over to Elton to comment off of there, but I want to add in a couple spatterings. So yes, absolutely. From a cloud service provider perspective, you're like, hey, we have better RTO, RPO because we knew replication. It's a different animal. It's kind of like when you say, do I really need a cloud provider if you have multi-data centers? Not really, unless you're doing what Elton touched upon, which was the 4.3 backup solution. And I'm going to pitch that back. So even if I have a cloud service provider and I'm like, I have this warm site on the professional service side, I'm like, I love those guys. They're wonderful till they're not. Anybody hedging their bet for very low cost can move into a Backblaze IBR scenario in there. So Elton, where do you come into play with what Jonah's saying? Well, what are you seeing out there?
Yeah. So again, it all comes down to what are what's the motivation and what you're looking to accomplish? What are your objectives kind of deal, right? If you are looking for near real-time, RTOs, there is latency in object storage. There is latency in pulling those backups into a cloud provider using Cloud IBR. But with a service provider, cloud provider, known as VCSPs, they have the infrastructure up and running. It's running all the time. The backups are closed. There's no latency. You can restore those a lot faster, but it comes at a price point. If you look at the Cloud IBR plus Backblaze, you're paying for Backblaze storage, which is a fraction of the price of the hyperscalers. You're paying for Cloud IBR, a platform fee, but you're not paying for any compute unless you are spinning up an environment from your backup. So it's far more affordable from a price point perspective as well as objectives perspective. There's value on both sides, right? You mentioned Greg. Greg is a cloud provider. It's part of his business, right? This is a spun-off thing because I'm not sure if you've heard the story, but we had breakfast with Greg in New York back in 2021, and we pitched him this idea like, hey, we have a lot of customers coming to us for backup as a service, and when we asked them, hey, what's your DR plan? Every single customer will be like, what DR plan? DR is too expensive. We can't afford DR. And when I told Greg, I'm like, I have all of the scripts that I've written in Ansible that can basically simulate an entire DR on demand by clicking a button. Do you think you can productize this and sell it to a market that's below the market that you are trying to address, as a VCSP? And that was the birth of Cloud IBR. He took my scripts and he built a product on top of it. And today it's known as Cloud IBR.
That's awesome. I had not ever heard that story. And I'm really glad that you touched upon pricing, because in the consultancy world, I find I will walk in and do an audit. Normally, that's the first thing somebody has. If they have Veeam, they say audit it. If they don't have Veeam, we build it, but we provide almost like a roadmap, and everything leads to a roadmap. And you're right about price. What I love about the layering is if I have a customer that has basically scraped enough money together to buy Veeam, and they're like, whoo, we got it. We're able to say, well, what are you doing off site? And they're like, well, we're not. And we're like, take a look at Cyber Fortress, take a look at this. And they're like, whoa. We don't have all this money. And we're like, you got to go somewhere. Backblaze, boom, in. And then we're like, but you need to have DR at some point, like for real. So are we moving to a cloud service provider to get everything real tight? Well, we can't afford that. Okay, well, we can add on a Cloud IBR. So here's your base fee. So it's pre-configured, ready to go. But don't worry, customer. We can introduce IBR at any point, but you're going to commit to a year of that kind of base fee. And it's not a lot. But what that gives you is the quick recoverability. So on your worst day, it's going to take us 3 to 4 days to get you configured and going and whatnot. You get your commit, you go. Okay, now I'm in an IBR situation. Wonderful. Great. I can do something with those backups. So the customer's like, good. Are we done? You need a VCSP. Why do I need that? Because I can IBR. Because what Jonah's talking about, those RTO, RPO. So we see this nice progression, and it's interesting because in the Texas Veeam user group, these are all sponsors that we have working together, and we don't take sponsor monies lightly or recommendations. It really needs to be a good roadmap. And what we found is this great kind of grouping of object first for a hardened repository on site. We can Linux hardened repository for free, but free has its challenge. Object first, great package. You end up having Backblaze as a wonderful S3 target. There you go. We can write it. We can immute it. We can lock it. You're getting a great price. It works. If it all goes to hell, there's IBR sitting there either pre-configured or ready to be configured. You have the absolute further roadmap of a Cyber Fortress, which is like the Mac Daddy one solution. They kind of do it all. But I layer it that way when we talk about it, because what if you just jump to a straight Cyber Fortress? I assume they'll never break, but you can't risk your company on this. You can't risk your job on this. 4-3 methodology that you speak about. And all of these components build that resilient, and that's the hardcore. And I love it because every time we're all out and we're talking, we all keep passing more and more circles. We're all starting to integrate so much tighter now, as this is the robust solution. And I guarantee you, if you talk to Object First and you're out there and they're like, this is the device, those guys are going to tell you, Jeff Berg's going to tell you, you got to get it up somewhere. Go over to, your name comes up over at Backblaze. Oh, I don't know how to do it. different dev comes in. I really need to replicate something. Cyber Fortress comes in, and we're just bouncing everybody around to really deliver to our customer. And to me, that's such a great world because you're getting like 4 independent companies that just believe in the other person's product to bring it about. And so I know I didn't know much about Backblaze when you and I met. I mean, we were boothing it together at Veeam and just kind of kicked the tires of who are y'all? And I think you guys were throwing stuff over the booth at us, and we were doing the same thing because we're grown children, basically. And we got to know each other more. I was introduced to you, Elton, and I just learned so much from you in there. So before we close out here, just final thoughts for yourself. Like, what have we not talked about, or what do you want the audience to walk away with about the Backblaze solution?
So we've covered a lot, and in the end, we want to be the right choice for you and for the customer, and be the trusted landlord for the customer's data and backup. But beyond all of this, right, cyber insurance is becoming more and more of a topic, and being able to show that you're protected in a way that it gives the insurance company confidence that they don't have to keep paying out a bunch of ransomwares is a big thing. So beyond all of this, there's an element to cyber insurance and cyber and making sure that you can generate compliance reports with which tools like Cloud IBR provide that give that confidence. But other than that, I will still go back to make sure you test your backups. That is by far the most important thing. If anyone listening to this it takes away from this podcast, is testing your backups is important.
Very good. I like it. Jonah, closing thoughts for you. Cyber Fortress, let's pay the bills. They help, keep you here. Get your salary paid for, my friend. What are your closing thoughts?
I do like that we keep touching on test your backups, because I don't know how many times I've had to beat that horse dead in webinars. And that's a very big thing. We have a lot of customers with the capability to do DR tests, and only a fraction of them actually call in and leverage the capability. And then, of course, they eventually fail over to us. They have problems during the disaster. And it was like, well, maybe if we had tested, we would have resolved the issues beforehand, or at least known what they were, had them pre-documented for a quicker resolution. And yeah, Cyber Fortress, obviously Veeam Platinum service provider, but also kind of just the one-stop shop for backup and recovery. So if there's something that Veeam can't do, there's a chance we have another product in our portfolio that can do it. Or even, talk to us about our Salesforce early access that we're using Veeam Backup for Salesforce to power as one of the first, if not the first, VCSP.
Yeah, that's great. And bringing it all together with different dev. Hey, folks, this is complex. This is crazy. We can help you do it. But I'm going to build upon what Elton said, cyber insurance. Do your due diligence and have an independent eye in there working and with you. Just like your CISO reports outside of IT, we at Different Dev need to be auditing your Veeam environment, your DR plan. So that way, when you invoke that cyber insurance, we can say things like, you did your diligence. If something was missed, it wasn't your fault. It falls upon us to do it. And we would have built in local resiliency. We would have done exactly what Elton said. We would have been up in that cloud. We would have been testing it. We would have been safe. And we know insurance companies don't like to pay. If they had to pay every policy they had, they would be out of business. So it's not in their interest to give money back. I believe as we see more and more litigation come through from non-payment scenarios, when an independent agency is in there, it's going to be a thing. And now's the time to do it before I believe these cyber agencies will do what they've done in other areas. They're going to start looking to auditing firms like Different Dev to say, will you be on our retainer to do some auditing and force you through? So today you have freedom of choice. Use it, protect yourself. I want to thank my cohort here, Jonah May, for taking some time for being here today. Elton, wonderful to see you again. Thank you for coming on our podcast. And we're going to play some fun music out, and we'll see you on our next episode, listeners.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Jonah.
Whether you're a seasoned solutionist or just starting out, the Rebel Devs podcast is a must listen. So join us. Comment, share, and subscribe. Be part of the Rebel Devs.